Migration in Australia. He has published several studies promoting the importance of ethnic studies as an integral part of the Australian history. He has written The Maltese in Australia and Empire and Rights, several articles in academic journals, a regular column in the Maltese Herald, and a series of monographs of Australia-Maltese studies. Barry York works as a research fellow at the Australian National University and shares a keen enthusiasm in all aspects of Maltese migration to Australia. Mr. Barry York.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here tonight. We only just made it all the way from Canberra, and we were a bit worried about being late, so it's dubbed a great relief to be here on time as well. But what a wonderful occasion this is. A very satisfying one, I'm sure, for Mark Caruana as much as for myself. The book that is being launched here this evening is the story of a remarkable individual, Mr. Emmanuel Attard, who came to Australia in 1916. I'm very happy to be here tonight with my wife, Joan, and our baby son, Joseph, who's only 15 months old. And I often wonder, when my son is my age, what will he make of these books that have been written about the history not only of my ancestors but of his as well. Tonight we also have Mark Cranfield from the National Library of Australia. The National Library has shown an interest in preserving on tape the memories of the early migrants from Malta. Again, I think of my little boy over there. In the year 2016, which is not that far away, only 20 years away, when little Joe is 20, he'll be able to go to the National Library in Canberra, and there, preserved on tape, will be 8 hours of interview with Emmanuel Attard. In other words, he and even his children will have access to the migrant story as told in the words of those who experienced it. And I think that's a great achievement, not just for the National Library, but it's also something for the Maltese community to feel very happy about, because it's this particular community that the National Library has shown an interest in more than any others. For me, meeting Mr. Attard and Brian and Monica highlighted the real joy of being a historian of the Maltese in Australia, because apart from having books published, I feel I've also made new friends from projects like this, people that I respect a lot and have learned a lot from. My father was Maltese, born in 1918, and his father, Saliba and Joe was from Untitled, as was my grandmother, Loretta Mercia, it's her maiden name. And meeting Mr. Attard, for me, was quite an emotional experience, because I never actually knew my Gozo grandparents. Both, unfortunately, passed away before I was born. And in Mr. Attard, I learned more than just something about the history of migration, but also this is what my own grandfather was probably like. And I feel a great affinity and bond with Mr. Attard for that reason. I haven't said that before, but that's how I felt from the day in 1989 when I had the pleasure of going to Adelaide to sit down and learn from his life experiences, and as I said, put them on tape, which is then preserved by the National Library for future generations. I have to thank people number one person to thank. Next come Brian and Monica, his children, and Josie Attard. I couldn't have gone to Adelaide in 1989 had it not been for the support of the National Library and for the support of the Australian National University, who helped me to spend a week over there with Mr. Attard. So I have to acknowledge them as well. Being a historian isn't always an easy job, partly because I suppose we're living in a time when everything has to have an economic value, an immediate value that can be translated into monetary terms. And of course history, like art and other aspects of the humanities, isn't always like that. So I also wish to thank World Aviation Services for their very necessary support from enabling Monica and Mr. Attard to be here tonight. Also the Mid-Bed Bank for their continuing interest. And hopefully the interest of both those organisations will continue, because it is needed if we are to fully document the Maltese experience and contribution to this country. Finally, there is Mark Caruana, who was the compiler or co-compiler of this book. It was really great working with Mark, because I like to work with somebody who is principled and who has a genuine commitment to what they're doing. And Mark certainly met both those criteria. We also had the benefit of, even though being separated by a fair few kilometres, me being in Canberra, Mark being in Sydney, we benefited from modern technology. I don't know how many faxes we sent, how many long-distance telephone calls, but we've proven, I hope, that it can be done. Now, I don't just mean that we can produce a book, but that people within the community who share a commitment to a particular project can work together cooperatively. And we can put our egos aside, if I might put it that way, for something greater. And that's what I like to think Mark and I have achieved. So, when my young son has his 21st birthday, I hope that he'll make a trip to the National Library. I hope he'll hear Mr. Attard's tape and the tape of the many other Maltese who have been, whose memories and experiences have been preserved in that way. I thank you all very much for making tonight possible. I hope you enjoy the book. I hope that it will remind people of the fact that, well, if I might use an old Maltese saying that somebody told me, I can't say it in Maltese, but that the migrants that came here did not always find the bed made for them. And that was certainly the case for Mr. Attard's generation. But without them, without the people who came from Gozo all those years ago and other parts of Malta, the many thousands who called Australia home after the Second World War may have found it a lot more difficult to settle here. So I'll finish off now as I began with my very sincere thanks to everybody for making this book and this evening possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barry York. Proceed now with the program. The poem recited by Frank Salmon. Frank is Marsa born. Marsa is in Malta, but for those people who might not know. Frank is the president of the Maltese Cultural Association of New South Wales. His first encounter with the New Caledonia incident was on one fine day in 1988, to be exact on Anzac Day, when he decided to compose a long poem and had the fortune, or the misfortune, to show it to some of his friends, including Mark Caruana. From that day on, Frank was struck with the New Caledonia fever. He has composed a series of poems as part of this long-term project. Frank is well known within the community and outside it. He's a keen promoter of the Maltese language, himself being a poet and an author. Mr. Frank Salmon.
Thank you, Joe, for that elaborate introduction. I am a very great believer in using the Maltese language in gatherings where basically there are Maltese, but we had occasions to, as Joe said, to celebrate the memory of the Maltese of New Caledonia in Maltese to a great extent, not only by the Valette, written and also put to music with Anna Marti. We had also other occasions to celebrate the 75th anniversary together in the presence of Dr. Berriot and others, and we were proud to basically keep that program in Maltese. But this is Australian history as well as Maltese history, or the history of the Maltese people in Australia. So we also have to put, as Berriot and Mark Caruana did, some of our writing also in English. And this is one poem, an additional poem I wrote recently. In fact, it is written to the music of a waltz composed by Teresa Juice, another Australia-born Maltese young lady. And it's supposed to be sung to the tune of this waltz. The Maltese of New Caledonia. We left our dear country, the island of Malta. We left our dear history, our family and friend. We suffered the hardship of a dangerous journey to come to Australia, the vast lucky land. We carried the passport of the British Crown. They called us their subjects, but soon let us down. Our protectors soon let us down. The First World War raging, and many Australians were being conscripted to fight overseas. The unions discovered that from the small island, the Gange was approaching with a load of Maltese. They threatened the government with strikes and destructions to schemes of conscription, and argued in rage. They scared Mr. Hughes when they falsely accused us and called us black labourers who toiled for cheap wage. We carried the passport of the British Crown. They called us their subjects, but soon let us down. Our protectors soon let us down. We were all denied rights of disembarkation. Wherever we tried, the plain answer was no. A few of the brave ones jumped ship, but they were captured and treated as criminals, no farther to go. We were all examined in a strange foreign language. We were locked away in old hulks, guarded well. We were denied justice and legal protection. We were the poor victims who suffered in hell. We carried the passports of the British Crown. They called us their subjects, but soon let us down. Our protectors soon let us down. Our families in Malta were anxious and waiting for news of their loved ones and money to live. Oh, surely Australia, the vast lucky country, to friends long established had plenty to give. They shipped us as livestock on old cargo vessels. In New Caledonia for weeks were detained. They made all arrangements to return us to Malta, but that was outrageous. All our friends complained. We carried the passports of the British Crown. They called us their subjects, but soon let us down. Our protectors soon let us down. There were the good soldiers of Anzac, who in Malta were treated as friends and were grateful indeed. There were those who justly regarded our nations as the citadel of Australia in need. We left our dear country, the island of Malta. We left our dear history, our family and friend. We suffered the hardship of a dangerous journey to come to Australia, the vast lucky land. We carried the passport of the British Crown. We earned our freedom of country and town. Let us enter country and town. We left our dear country, the island of Malta. We brave, we hard-working, together we stand. We fight for our rights, but give more than we ask for. We made our new home of this vast, lucky land. Thank you. I should add that in appreciation of Mr. Attard's contribution to the arrival of the Maltese of New Caledonia to Australia, I very much appreciate his say in all that, and I dedicate heartily this poem to you, Mr. Attard.
Before I ask Mr. Mark Caruana to come and produce the next item on the program, I'd like to say a couple of words about Mark himself. Mark's interest in Maltese oral history started around 1982, when he began interviewing on cassette early Maltese immigrants who were then in their 80s. Their settlement experiences were captured and recorded, and he placed a particular emphasis on pre-World War II settlers from the Maltese Islands. The following year, in 1983, Mark was instrumental in organizing the activities commemorating the centenary of organized Maltese migration to Australia. One of the highlights was the gala concert held at the Sydney Opera House by the Valette Social Centre. Besides Mark's association with this centre, he is also a foundation member of the Maltese Cultural Association of New South Wales, which had its origin immediately after the release of the booklet and cassette called Il Ballata del Maltese New Caledonia, through the medium of modernized folk singing, or Ana. Needless to say, Mark could not sing Ana, so he did the next best thing. He coordinated the research and the book side of things. Mark has by now interviewed over 80 early settlers, and seems to be moving towards transcribing such interviews onto Little Apple Mac, having mastered the wonders of the computer world. Mark prefers to work collaboratively, to share his enthusiasm and to extend his network with others, especially those with similar interests. This joint publication is but one example, with others which I'm sure we're bound to follow. Mark Caruana.
Thanks, Joe. I'll now ask the Anaya and the guitar players to come forward. This segment will be in Maltese, as it is very much part of our culture. Ana is a very skillful tradition where you have to think on your feet and you have to compose poetry, spiritu poem, which is something which demands a lot of skill. And so I asked the Ana people, they seem to have disappeared. And I'll introduce their names. The guitar players will be Ronnie Borg from Gange, Malta, who is also a committee member at Valette. Another guitar player is Australia-born, Josie Bonello, who is second generation Maltese. Ana is played every Saturday at this centre, and it's one way of keeping the tradition alive. The Anaya, the folk singers, are Frank Saliba from Gozo, known better as Gozo, and he looks after the Anaya. And The other Anne is Joe Bonello, who is from Sigiri, Malta. So let's give them a round of applause.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, you're going to hear some of the music in Maltese. Well, I hope Mr. Attard, he understands about it, and everybody, well, we welcome to come in to see and celebrate this festival tonight. Thank you very much. They start the guitars of us. Thank you. Charles Bonello, his father Joe, and Ronnie Borg. Thank you very much. After this, we're going to sing a few in Maltese to keep our folklore of Maltese. All right? I hope it's everybody enjoying it. Thank you. Now, unfortunately, we haven't got much singers tonight because might be some work or something like, you know, I couldn't say, or might be shy, they coming on this occasionally, and we're going to sing me and Joe Bonello.
The young and the old.
The young and the old, that's right, yeah. All right.
على شدة
Australia. Infatti min io Caledonia. Raja will torna Australia.
I believe that it was very fitting to have that honor segment as part of the launching of a historic book. The folk music and song, which requires such skill and talent, is very much part of the Maltese history and tradition. I was very pleased to see young Bonello among the guitarists, and I think he deserves our applause. Moreover, the Zana segment was introduced for the benefit of Mr. Emmanuel Attard, who hasn't had Anna for a long time. And I feel that he must have felt some nostalgic tingles tonight. I would like now to invite to the podium Mr. Mark Cranfield to launch the book. Mr. Mark Cranfield is the Chief Oral History Officer at the Australian National University. He saw the value of having an in-depth history interview with Emmanuel Attard as a matter of priority, and approved Barry and Mark's request to support this project. The Maltese community is very appreciative of the decision he took, and I am sure that the completion of their project validates the trust and the wise decision he took then. Let us give him a round of applause. Mr. Mark.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for that. Distinguished guests, the Attard family, ladies and gentlemen, and young people. I see one or two young people here. I believe I've got about 20 minutes to speak to you, and I thought I would try and give you an overview of where this book fits, historically into the National Library's activities in the field of oral history, and to explain to you why we would see it as a rare publication, a valuable publication, and an inspiring publication. Now, the library has been involved in oral history one way and another since about 1950. It began thinking about oral history in 1950, exploring possibilities, and so on. It started to do something in 1957, when it began to develop a representative collection on behalf of the Australian people, which is continuing today. Although the collection at the moment consists of more than 50,000 tape recordings, its beginnings were very modest. Support was given to one collector only, a Sydney woman named Hazel de Berg, who bought her own equipment, trained herself, and even borrowed her neighbour's car to get to her recording appointments. Her focus, this is in the early 1960s, was on outstanding identities, on well-known Australians of high achievement in the arts, in education, and in science. She realised that many of these people had never been tape recorded for archival or historical or heritage reasons, and that many were very elderly and in some cases were quite ill. The first person she ever recorded, and it's very appropriate tonight in view of what we've been listening to, was a famous writer and poet, Dame Mary Gilmore. And I thought it might interest you to hear that recording tonight. We're going to try this. We didn't have time to do a test, so we have a recording in the other room, which I hope will carry. It will take about 5 minutes or so to listen to, but it will give you a little bit of a feel for the sort of thing that we're doing and the sort of thing we're talking about tonight. So we just give Laurie Dimmock a minute or two to press the button. Then we give the tape a second or two to roll.
Everybody, here I am, Mary Gilmore, asked to talk to you about Australia, my recollections. Of course, I go such a long way back, 95 years, and now nearly going on for 96. And I've seen the beginnings. I began myself with a slush lamp, went on to the tallow candle. We used to lend our candle bowl to the neighbours. Then to the imported stearine candle, and then to kerosene lamps, and from kerosene to gas, from gas to the electric light, and now we have ahead of us the atomic to cover every mortal thing that we can think of. It seems an astounding thing for one person's recollections. Also, to go back, I remember the poor old convicts, so many of them. They worked for my father, some of them. Some of them had backs that were ridged and ridged from the lash. I remember one station, a big rich man, and he could never go swimming. It was noted everybody swam when there was water, because there were no baths and houses, of course, you only had a tub. And it was noted by his men that when they would go in swimming, he'd sit on the bank and he wouldn't go in. And one day, without thinking, the poor man pulled his shirt off and jumped in. Father was in the water, so he caught hold of his arm and said, "Come on, we'll go a race to a different place." And he took him right away from where the men could see him. His back was ridged too. And that was how the land was begun, how it was settled in the beginning, how the big Australia, with its wide range of international linkings now, began. And those were the people who began it. For instance, the people who are ashamed of other convicts can leave it off. The day has gone by when people should be afraid of the convicts who came here and suffered the heat, the cold, the starvation, and the misery of founding this country and establishing it till it is what it is today. There was nothing too hard for them, nothing too cruel, because those were cruel times. I remember Captain McAllister at Goldman, who was a magistrate and a descendant of a very well-known family, friends of the Prince Regent of his day, who advocated the lengthening of the points of the cat, which were metal so that they would cut deeper into the backs of the convicts. His grandson wrote Tales of the Sunny South, I think it was called. He wrote it because of an article I had written in the Goldman Penny Post some years before. He, of course, had none of those feelings. And he told stories and stories of the old days that are most interesting. It wasn't only McAllister who was cruel. I can remember, as a small child, seeing bodies, the remnants of bodies of convicts who'd been hanged to trees on Pinchgut, now Fort Denison, of course. We don't say that naughty word now. You know why it was called Pinchgut, of course, because the people, the convicts put there were literally starved. I've seen the remnants of skeletons on those when I was a very, very small child. I don't want to tell you how young I was to be able to say I couldn't remember, but I do. And the whole of our history is based on those early days and those people. Out of their courage, out of their endurance, came our explorers, some of them. They may have come from overseas as their parents. And also came the people who went out into the back country. Parramatta was once almost back country, if you were to go back to your grandparents. Into the back country, afraid of the Aboriginals, who were then quite numerous, but without whom, my grandmother told me, Australia never could have been settled, because they were so good to the white people. They would mind the children for the women, the lubras would. They would find the cattle when they were lost, and cattle were precious things in those days. When my grandfather managed at Rocky House, the Lows, they only had 4 cows. And that showed how few cattle were in those early days and how precious they were and how valuable it was when the blacks went and brought them back again. Well, we have the blacks for our background for stories, and we have the convicts. In later years, when my book, The Passionate Heart, was published, I wrote a piece of verse for it on that subject, because I was full of indignation at the idiocy of letting go in silence what was our basic history, and I still feel that way. And this is the verse. It's called Old Botany Bay. I'm Old Botany Bay, stiff in the joints, little to say. I am he who paved the way that you might walk at your ease today. I was the conscript sent to hell to make in the desert the living well. I bore the heat, I blazed the track, furrowed and bloody upon my back. I split the rock, I felled the tree. The nation was because of me. Old Botany Bay, taking the sun from day to day. Shame on the mouth that would deny the knotted hands that set us high.
That's it, thank you. Thank you for listening to that, because it does go on for a little bit and it's trying to go on again. But at the time she said those words and looked back on her life, she was 95 years of age, 1961, very much the same age as Mr. Attard is today. And some of the things that she talks about, I think Mr. Attard knows a good deal about as well. Most of the people that Hazel de Burgh recorded in her early years were from mainstream Australian culture at the time, the Anglo-Celtic heritage English-speaking people. Dame Mary Gilmore, the poet Dorothea McKellar was another very well-known one, the writer Norman Lindsay, the dancer Sir Robert Helpman, and many, many more. As time went by, however, and as Australia became more ethnically diverse, many more people of European background were recorded. Greek, Dutch, German, Czech, Hungarian, Italian, Austrian, and so on. But these tended to be prize-winning artists, award-winning writers, leading actors and filmmakers, well-known people of high achievement. And that was a pattern of collecting activity all through the 1960s. By about 1970, the library began to extend its collecting net into other fields, especially into politics, into the bureaucracy at Commonwealth level, and into journalism. These were all seen to be significant areas of Australian life. Extensive interviews were carried out with the specific aim of supplementing the collections of personal papers which the library holds of people like this in its manuscript collection. The interview tapes and transcripts were intended to go alongside the letters, the diaries, journals, the notebooks, and so on, of Prime Ministers, of heads of Commonwealth Government departments, and of leading journalists from the most influential newspapers. While that was happening, however, a growing number of historians were becoming interested in looking at everyday life, at the activities of ordinary people, in looking into the history of less high-profile groups and communities, into documenting the experiences of the kinds of people who had so interested and so moved Dame Mary Gilmore. It was about this time, I'm speaking now of the late 1970s, that the work of a pioneering Melbourne-based oral historian named Wendy Lowenstein began to attract attention. Her first book was called The Immigrants. It came out in 1977, and it explored the migrant experience through a series of oral history interviews. She followed up in 1978 with Weevils in the Flower, a book based on interviews with men and women who had lived through the Great Depression of the 1930s. It was one of the most controversial and best-selling histories ever released in Australia. A third book, Under the Hook, Melbourne Waterside Workers Remember, came out in 1982, and it was in similar style. Wendy Lowenstein said in that book about the waterside workers these words: "Most histories are written by winners about winners. Sometimes they are written about the workers, but seldom in the words of the workers themselves." She went on, "When working people die, their lives are most often lost to memory. Sometimes they leave bricks and mortar, the roads, or the railways they built. Traces remain of the wheelwright's art, or of the blacksmith. But the art of the waterside worker lay in his ability to stow a ship safely for sea. Only the wealth that he helped to create still remains, and that doesn't belong to him." She continued, "Conventional histories, more often than not, ignore the importance of working class lives. They become almost invisible to history. This is not surprising, but when working people themselves accept the judgment, believe that their own lives are insignificant and without meaning, it is a tragedy, not only for themselves, but for the possibility of a really democratic society. Working class people are the majority group in our society. They build the roads and they dig the mines. We hope that more working people will think about the significance of their own work in life and will record or write their own life stories." That was Wendy Lowenstein in 1982. Now, I'm pleased to be able to say that the National Library has acquired all of the tapes and all of the transcripts recorded by Wendy Lowenstein for her books Weevils in the Flower and Under the Hook, and that the library is continuing to support her fieldwork today. She's approaching 70 years of age, supporting her with tape and meeting her out-of-pocket expenses. Under the Hook was published in 1982. In 1984, there was something of a major breakthrough at the Commonwealth level when the Department of Employment and Industrial Relations provided funds for a very large-scale oral history project, and it was coordinated through the National Library. The point I'm trying to make here is that oral history was beginning to expand, it was beginning to attract more resources, it was beginning to, come under notice in a more significant way. The project I'm talking about now as I say, came into being in 1984. The early 1980s, you might remember, was a time of high and rising unemployment, and the project was designed to focus on this fact. It was called The Cultural Context of Unemployment, an Oral Record, and it recruited 50 unemployed people, finding them through CES offices, and it trained them to interview and to transcribe. It divided them into 5 groups of 10, and they recorded 500 interviews throughout Australia in a number of categories. And those categories were unemployed school leavers in Perth, Indo-Chinese refugees in Sydney, Aboriginal people in Melbourne, rural unemployed in northern New South Wales, and women in southeast Queensland. That was a major gain, 500 interviews of unemployed people. Imagine if there were 500 in-depth interviews of people who lived through the 1930s depression. Well, it's too late now, but for the early depression of the 1980s, there's a very substantial amount of material. The cultural concept of cultural context of unemployment project was conducted over a 2-year period from 1984 to 1986. 2 years later came the bicentennial year, 1988, with its very strong focus on community and on nation. It was a very significant year for oral history, providing the essential ingredient, funding, for a number of substantial social history style oral history projects. I won't go into all the details because time is passing, but suffice it to say, tapes and transcripts produced by those projects too have been lodged in the National Library. Now, it was at about this time that I first met Dr. Barry York, and not too long afterwards that I began to hear the name of Mr. Emmanuel Attard. As a postgraduate student in the mid-1980s, Barry had already recorded interviews with many Maltese Australians. But as he has written recently in a report that he compiled for the library, and I'm quoting from Barry here, my oral history work took a very satisfying leap forward in 1989, when I commenced a relationship with the National Library's oral history section. My earlier years were akin to a working life as a builder's labourer, but I now feel more like a builder, if not a master builder. What Barry means there is that for the first time he had access to professional sound recording equipment, he had archival quality tape stock to work with, he had transcription funding, and he had out-of-pocket expenses. He also knew that his film recordings would be copied and stored in the library's temperature-controlled, humidity-controlled oral history sound archive, one of the very few that there is in the country. He knew that details of his recordings would be catalogued onto the library's nationally accessible database, so that anybody interested in any aspect of Maltese Australian history as it's been recorded by Barry can get access to it through their local library. All they need to do is ask the computer in their national library. And finally, at this time, Barry began to realise that he had the friendship and support of the library's oral history and sound preservation team, a group which now consists of about 10 full-time staff members. In the early Hazel de Berg days, I spoke about it first, staff allocation at the library was 1/2 of 1 staff member if that staff member showed up. Since linking up with the library, Barry has researched and recorded many full-scale interviews with Maltese Australian people in the ACT, New South Wales, Victoria, Queensland, South Australia and in Western Australia. Again, I won't go into detail about these. Barry, I'm sure, would be happy to talk about them. But there was one interview which he always seemed to treasure above the rest, and that was his interview with Mr. Emmanuel Attard. At first, I thought this interview would be just more or less like any other, that it would be filed away at the library, waiting for the day when some future researcher might use it in a thesis or for an article, or possibly in a radio documentary program. Or maybe included in a book as one of a group of interviews in the style of Wendy Lowenstein. But no. Barry was determined to bring this interview out as a separate publication. And so he has, with the full backing of the National Library and the Centre for Immigration and Cultural Studies, and with the invaluable help of his friend and associate, Mr. Mark Caruana. Barry and Mark have achieved with this book at least 4 important goals. They have provided a tribute to Mr. Attard. They have provided a work which puts some of the Maltese Australian community's history back into its own hands. They have provided a work which is a model for other ethnic community groups to learn from and to follow. And they have provided a work which all Australians could read with considerable benefit. Very briefly, I'll just mention 1 or 2 or 3 maybe of the features of this book. It contains an excellent introduction by Dr. Barry York, filled with insights about oral history and rich in scholarly understanding. Barry is a fine historian, passionately interested in documenting Maltese Australian history and disseminating information to the rest of the community. The second thing about it is that it includes original writings by Mr. Attard, long before Barry York ever met him. His own life history in his own words, written from memory. His poem. It contains copies of historical letters and official records. You see the hand of the historian in the book everywhere. It has a bibliography, an index, and even a little box at the back, requests for further information about the Gange. If there's anything that these men don't know, they want to find out, so they supply their names and addresses. Very thorough. And of course, the centrepiece of the book is the interview with Mr. Attard, edited down from 8 hours of original field recordings. Clearly, this publication is the heartfelt work of 3 dedicated historians of Maltese Australian life. Dr. Barry York, Mr. Mark Caruana, Mr. Emmanuel Attard. Long may it live. Thank you for your patience. I would now like to declare that this book, as I said, rare, valuable and inspiring, Emmanuel Attard from Gozo, Malta to Gallipoli and Australia, is officially before you launched.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cranfield. I would like now to invite Mark Caruana to express his appreciation and vote of thanks.
I am indebted to a number of people, particularly 2 sponsors, World Aviation, who, as said earlier, sponsored the trip. Godfrey Swain, I had to be present, I'm not too sure this year, but on behalf of World Aviation, I'd like to present a photo of Byron Jack Dam. Byron Jack Dam, similar to Warragamba Dam, built in the early 1910s. A lot of Maltese worked there, one of which was Emmanuel Attard. So on behalf of World Aviation, I'd like to present the story of Emmanuel Attard. I'm also indebted to Mid Bank, Victor Bollicino. I consider a friend, I hope he still is, because he's always impaired me on. I'd like to call him, he has some small presentations, to give off the hum on behalf of the bank. Midland Bank are also the official sponsors of Valette Social Center. Victor is biased, actually. He's Gozo born, but Malta reared. So the books on Gozo, very appropriate. And one also for Monica and Brian.
Welcome to Mr. Attard, who said that Christmas comes but once a year. It's an honor. Can we speak more, please? Onur għalina li ħadna daqsxejn ta' parteċipazzjoni żgħira għal l-intrapriża Ġiferi u Caruana.
Emmanuel Attard would like to recite a poem he composed, Hanina Malta, on sleepless nights when he had strong nostalgic feelings to return to Gozo. He has never been back. So Emmanuel Attard, this is outside the program, would like to recite it.
Good.
Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate very much the honor that you gave me tonight. Now, I'm going to recite the home made. That's what I thought I had. I'm going to recite Hanina Marta. That's the poem. Hanina Marta, Tejnik Gachi, Uwejli Shitri, Ujina Namer Kollosh Arik. Hanina Marta, Illum Sanhallik, Fensamur Manavsgu, Imma Enti Mijaj Dejjem tkun. Hanina Marta, Tinik Pjaċir, u għajri xitrit, u jenrilek għatman insik.
Thank you, Mr. Attard, for a very heart-rendering poem. And I think it would be appropriate. Oh, I haven't finished. Victor hasn't finished.
Yeah, this picture here. Onur għalina mill-Bank li nkunu assoċjati anki mal-ktib storiku li Dr. Berriok u Mark Caruana prezentaw, bil-għajnuna anki da Mr. Attard stess l-intervisti li għamlulu. U speċi biex narnu daqxej mill-ispejjeż li kien hemm, għandi pjaċir nippreżenta lil-Mark. Ringrazzjakom, kun nġijaw prezenti għal-launching tal-ktib u nispera li kulħadd jixtri kopja.
Insejjaħ li l-konslu il-sur George Bushkiri li fisem il-Gvern ta' Malta ħajam il-prezentazzjoni zaħira wkoll. Hija minn Pendle Hill Market, naħseb m'hemm xejn aktar li jagħti pjaċir, speċjalment jekk wieħed minn Għawdex illi idu ġbejniet ta' Għawdex. Allura fl-għajnuna ta' Pendle Hill Market, meżewġ bażetti ta' ġbejniet għal-benefiċċju ta' Emmanuel Attard. U bekk li konkludi l-parti uffiċjali, nistedinkom li għaw refreshments available, tew kafe available, jek xaħat jużaw mill-bar u miftuħ ukoll. Grazzi ħafna tal-li ġejtu, il-kol kemmilkom u tal-li ħattu paċenzja u parteċipajt l-sejna.
You sing with us next time, more things. Sing with us. You sing with us.
Next time, you sing with it.
Good? You can beat, but you still put your memory.
You sang very well, anyway. You sang very well.
Oh, yes.
Very well. I'd rather have the while ringing it up.
try to do this.
There's a way of doing it.
We usually do this when somebody comes, like, you know,
Right,
from
yeah.
Malta or so on. Like, you know. But the trouble is, I know here since 1949.
Yeah.
But in English, I'm pretty awkward for me now, like, you know, because I'm always thinking about Maltese. You see,
Yeah.
well, I lost of, you know,
Yeah.
lost of things.
You do, yeah.
You know, I'm going to do my best.
I'm the opposite. I lost a lot of Maltese.
Does it? All right. All right, we'll see you again.
We'll see you again. Yeah, you go and stuff like I don't think they'd realise
Don't be shy.
Oh, no, it's all right. Yeah, no, I thought you wanted to get a photo.
Yes.
I thought I recognised you. Yeah. I don't see the face. Yeah, that's right. Very good for an accent. For the show, you know, it's such a good place. Oh, yeah. Here's the Roger Much Ali has sbaglio, ma you have to say. Oh, you do Father, how are you? I've been this afternoon. Yeah, that's a little bit, just slightly. That's it, Rick. Scusi? Yeah? No, I am sure boomerang. Yeah, so perhaps you want to take him for that. You're not sending that to us, are you? No.
Sometimes I speak. Also, sometimes, she likes to go to some of these things. Give it to me.
Yeah, just practice.
See, my mother was married in 1927 or 26. Hello. She's Australian. Did I tell him? Yeah. And then in Adelaide, you are related to this thing. There might have been some places.
Sometimes you tell English such as mine. Everyone in 1970, you tell them English such as mine. English is not such as mine. Le right smajt interpretaw. Meta għajt il-kelsu, il-dunajt Hello, Charlie, so does my name. Manuel, Rosa. He still speaks English with a Maltese accent. Rosa, Manuel. Congratulations. Emmanuel, very good. Brose. Yes. Congratulations on all this. He's had a very, very interesting life. Many more years to come. Terrific. Nice to meet you.
Many happy years to come. All the best.
All you do.
It really touched me then. It really touched my heart. Well done. We should express that in the Maltese
Yes, thank you. I agree with you. And that's the Scottish.
Thank you very much. Yes, you're welcome to Gozo too.
You did.
I've just never done that. I love it. Well, because I was born here and this Australia and I found the culture was just so different. Oh, you have to be. So I lived there. I know now. I couldn't live there. But I wanted to see where Dad just had all this, so I to see where he come from. Like my daughter wanted to see
We came with you on the same boat.
the father and my like
Yeah.
well done.
Tony Harper. How long? We was only aboard how long? Since we left in 1916 and came back to Australia, more or less from the time we came back to the war.
Came back to virtually in Australia. In 1960, never ever went back to Yes, it's a long time. It was born in 1898. It's a long way back.
My grandfather came from 1920 in Adelaide. I wonder if you know him. Yeah, I wonder if you know him. The same age as me. Paolo Mandina. Mandina. In 1920 in Adelaide.
What you made years ago in Australia. Oh,
I'll leave that for, I'm going to get the coffee, what do you want?
Do you think she'll manage a signature on this phone? When you're ready, I'll leave the coffee here with you.
I'm looking that too.
It'd be a great pleasure for me.
no, you're sitting, there's two next to you. They're one for Dad, one for me. On there.
Oh, you have it in it?
That's what I said, don't get on.
That's my deal there. Yeah, you want something else to wait?
Take your time, love. I'm not in a hurry.
Congratulations.
I appreciate it.
Very good. Yeah, congratulations. Congratulations. Very nice. No, it was very nice. My son was playing the guitar. Monica, her son was playing the guitar. He was playing the guitar. That's
Ron did that. Ron, that was nice. That was man with that too. They just got brand new.
تنساني أولي كيف؟ أنت بالآلة يمن عارفين
Thanks, Dave. Yes. Have you managed to do that?
My name is Renato.
That's all right.
Nothing special. I was getting so many things to hold. Got everything in.
Good man. That's all right. That's good enough. That's very nice. Thank you.
The other gentleman somewhere. There's another man.
Brian, how are you?
Brian, Victor.
Good day.
Victor and Grace.
Yeah, actually we're brothers, but he was less.
Where did you manage to
I
choose
said
one
that even though I have brothers, I said.
Where did you manage to choose one?
We used to be my dad used to be the same boat.
Was he?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah.
you've got something in common.
Yeah.
So you're born here too?
No.
No, no, he went back to Malta. He went back to Malta. Oh, did he? Oh, I see. Oh, yeah. And then he
was
stayed
only
in
here
Malta or he came back?
Yeah. He wasn't here
He
for
stayed
6
in
years.
Malta?
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
He was only here for 6 years.
Yeah.
I was going to say, yeah, that's my
I don't like the peace ones. I like the... Excuse me, when did you get the cheese one from?
Cheese one.
Did you try that one?
No, no, you know they upset me. I want to get up in the morning. I can't eat everything. I have to be careful what I eat.
You like Sydney at all? You like Sydney?
I don't mind Sydney, but I
You like
find
Melbourne? What
the
about
traffic worries me a lot, you
There's a
know.
lot of traffic down
It's a
there.
lot of traffic. We live
There'll be a
in
lot
Melbourne,
more.
we live in Chatston.
There's a lot more traffic now.
Yeah.
Next 2 years because
Yeah,
of
yeah.
the Olympic Games. So
Yeah.
we're here.
We live in Chatston, and that's, have you any idea of Melbourne at all?
Oh, a little bit, not much.
Yeah, well, we live on...
I've got relatives there too, and I've got a cousin
We
there.
live south. Where does he live? Do you know the suburb?
Geelong, I think.
Geelong. Well, that's on the other
further
side.
out.
Yeah, that's not where I live. I live more. If you come from Sydney to Melbourne, you've got to get to Melbourne, then you go on the other side.
Oh, yeah. The weather is different here.
It's all right, that's okay. You want to be
They had it very hard.
In modern mod. Unfortunately.
Could you ask him, please?
You haven't asked us already there.
Aqui hoje, Manuel. He doesn't hear anything.
Very nice.
Oh, yeah, of course. Prosit, Manuel. Prosit.
Prosit, yes.
Thank you.
Is he your father? Your father? And I've got the village. Oh, yeah. Which village were you from?
For 6 years.
One of the They remind me of my father, who was 91.
Andek a többek rá. Semmi,